The Great Space Academy floated above a blue gas giant, like a silver crown in the sky, its towers rising into the thin mist, its docking rings filled with ships from 100 worlds. And today was the day when the annual cadet trials would begin, the day when young warriors from every corner of the galaxy came to prove their worth, to earn the badge of the Academy, and to claim their place among the protectors of the stars. And in the middle of all that excitement, the humans had arrived, the cadets from Earth, walking together in neat lines through the main entrance hall that glowed with pale blue light from the crystal walls around them, their boots making a steady rhythm on the polished black floor that reflected their steps like dark water. Aliens of all shapes and sizes turned to look, some tall and thin with shining skin, some covered in scales like living armor, some floating above the ground on invisible energy fields. And as their eyes followed the humans, whispers began to move through the crowd like wind through dry leaves, first soft, then sharper, then louder, until the air was full of voices that carried both curiosity and scorn, and the words were not kind. They were heavy with laughter and mockery. One alien with long silver horns leaned toward another whose face shimmered like molten glass, and said in a voice that was not meant to be quiet, "Earth cadets are nothing but overrated children. They think they can stand with real fighters, but they are slow and fragile." And another alien with a split jaw full of needle teeth laughed in a way that made the sound echo down the hall, adding, "I heard they can barely last a minute in the combat ring. Their muscles are weak, their minds even weaker, yet they keep sending them here, as if they are the pride of their planet." The humans kept walking, their faces still, their eyes straight ahead, but the words followed them like biting insects, and some alien cadets moved aside in exaggerated gestures as if they feared the humans might trip and fall into them, the laughter rising again like a wave that refused to die down. And in the middle of the human line walked Yarrick, tall, but not the tallest, strong but not the largest, his hair dark, his skin sun-touched, his walk calm and steady like a man with nothing to prove. Yet his ears caught every insult, his mind recorded every laugh. And somewhere deep inside him, something sharp and cold began to take shape. One human cadet beside him, a young woman named Marin, muttered under her breath, "Do you hear this? Do you hear how they talk about us? I could break that horned one's pride in 2 seconds." And Yarrick answered in a voice that was almost too quiet to hear over the noise, "Save it for the trials, they will see." And she frowned, not sure if his tone meant anger or something else entirely. As they entered the great hall at the center of the academy, the sound of alien laughter grew even louder, for here the space opened into a giant amphitheater with balconies stacked high, filled with cadets from previous years, veterans in dark uniforms, instructors with their arms folded, and high above on the main balcony stood the academy commander, a tall figure in silver and black armor whose presence made even the loudest voices falter for a moment, but only for a moment. For the mockery was too strong to vanish so easily. Yarrick and the other Earth cadets were told to stand in a line at the front, facing the commander and the crowd, and the commander began to speak in the universal tongue, his voice deep and even. "Today begins the annual trials, the measure of skill, of mind, of spirit, and of will, and here stand the new challengers from many worlds, each seeking to rise above their peers and prove themselves worthy." And when he gestured toward the humans, there was a ripple of chuckles from the balconies, a sound that moved like a living thing through the air. The commander's gaze shifted from one group to another, then rested on the humans. And perhaps he too had heard the mocking voices, for there was a spark in his eyes when he said, "The trials are fair. The trials are hard. They will not bow to rumor or pride. They will reveal the truth of every cadet, and that truth will be earned, not given." And though his tone was measured, the crowd of aliens still seemed certain that the humans would fail. It was then that Yarrick stepped forward, a small step but enough to draw the attention of both his own team and the nearest balcony, his expression calm, almost lazy, as if he had been thinking of this moment for a long time. And in that soft pause between the commander's words and the next cheer from the crowd, Yarrick spoke, his voice carrying clear across the hall without him needing to shout, "I will pass every trial with my eyes closed." For a heartbeat, there was silence, as if the words had not yet reached the minds of the listeners. Then the sound came, First, a burst of sharp laughter from the front rows, then an explosion of noise from every corner. Aliens doubling over in their seats, some pounding the railings, some wiping at their eyes, as if Yerrick had told the greatest joke in the galaxy. And in the middle of that wave of amusement was a core of disbelief. For to them the idea was absurd, impossible, an insult to the very purpose of the trials. Even some of the human cadets turned to stare at Yerrick, their mouths slightly open, their eyes filled with both shock and doubt, and Marin leaned toward him and whispered, "You cannot be serious," and Yerrick answered without turning his head, "I am." And when she asked why, he only said, "Because it is the only way to make them listen." High above on the main balcony, the commander tilted his head, studying the young human as if trying to decide whether this was foolishness or something else. And after a moment, he spoke into the air for the recorders to capture. Cadet Yerrick of Earth has declared his intention to complete the trials without sight. This statement is now part of the trial record. The rules will not change to accommodate him. And with that simple announcement, the challenge became official, bound by the honor code of the Academy. The laughter in the crowd did not fade, but now it was mixed with a low murmur, a kind of electric tension that ran under the noise. For while most still believed Yerrick would fail in the first minutes of the first trial, a small number were curious enough to wonder if there was more to this human than met the eye, and curiosity was a dangerous seed in a place like this. For once planted, it could grow quickly into something no one expected. As the Earth cadets were dismissed to their quarters for the night before the trials, the mockery followed them like a shadow. Yet Yerrick walked as if the voices were far away, his hands loose at his sides, his steps measured, and when Marin caught up to him and asked again if he truly meant to keep his eyes closed through every trial, he simply smiled in that same calm way and said, "Wait and see." And there was something in his tone that made her stop asking, though the question still burned in her mind. That night in the dormitory, while others sharpened their gear and checked their weapons, Yerrick sat on his bunk with the lights off, breathing slowly, listening to the faint hum of the Academy walls, the distant rumble of ships docking, the soft footsteps in the corridor outside, and in that darkness he felt the world the way he had been taught, not with eyes, but with every other sense, every sound and vibration, every shift in air. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that tomorrow the laughter would not be so loud. The dawn over the gas giant spilled pale gold light through the high glass panels of the Academy arena, the air inside humming with the energy of thousands of voices gathered to witness the first trial, a test known among cadets as the reflex arena, a place where even the strongest warriors could fail in the blink of an eye. And for the humans, this would be the first chance to prove themselves, or the first step into humiliation, depending on who one asked. Yerrick walked with the rest of the Earth cadets into the preparation hall, the walls glowing faintly with blue light, the scent of metal and ozone drifting from the great energy gates ahead. Around him, alien cadets stretched limbs that bent in impossible angles, flexed claws, adjusted visors that gleamed with tracking data, their faces sharp with focus. Yet when their eyes fell on the humans, the smirks returned. The mutters passed from one mouth to another like sparks leaping between wires, and, though some voices were too quiet to catch, the meaning was always the same. They expected a quick failure, especially from the one who had sworn to keep his eyes closed. Marin stood near Yerrick, her gaze sweeping the towering entry gates, her voice low as she said, "You really plan to keep that cloth over your eyes in there? This place is no game." And Yerrick simply tied the black strip of fabric around his head, pulling it tight until it sealed the light away, and in that darkness he smiled faintly, saying, "That is the point." The gates opened with a slow, deep rumble, revealing the arena beyond, a massive circular platform suspended in midair, its floor broken into shifting tiles that moved without warning, great walls sliding up and down like the breath of some giant beast, energy beams flashing across the space, and narrow bridges spinning over open drops that fell into mist far below. It was a place built to punish hesitation, to reward speed and awareness. And the only sound above the mechanical grind was the constant roar of the crowd, rising from the stands that circled the arena like a living wall. The cadets stepped forward onto the starting platforms, each marked with glowing lines of color, the announcer's voice booming in the universal tongue. Welcome to the reflex arena, where only the fastest will reach the end, where the slow will fall. And today, we have something special, a human challenger named Yarrick who will attempt the course blindfolded, and the words sent a fresh wave of laughter rolling through the stands, sharp and cutting. Yet under it, there was a thread of excitement. For even the most skeptical loved to see something strange and daring, even if they believed it would end in disaster. The signal horn sounded, a long metallic cry that seemed to shake the air, and the first wave of obstacles began to move, great panels of the floor sliding aside to reveal gaps, beams of light sweeping across the space like hunting eyes, rotating columns swinging out to knock cadets from their paths. The aliens leapt forward with their visors flashing, their limbs quick and certain, yet in the middle of the chaos Yarrick stepped out with a slow grace, one foot touching the ground lightly before. The next moved, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to a sound no one else could hear. A four-armed cadet from the planet Raker leapt past him, grinning as he thought the human had already fallen behind, but then a spinning column swept toward Yarrick from the left, and without turning his head, Yarrick bent at the waist, letting the massive arm of steel pass just over his back. His movements so precise, it was as if he had been told the exact moment of impact. The crowd gasped, the sound sharp and sudden among the constant noise. And then he was moving again, stepping between two, shifting tiles at the exact moment they locked into place. More cadets surged ahead, some already tripping over the moving floor, one slipping into a hidden gap with a cry before vanishing into the mist below. But Yarrick kept a steady rhythm, his hands slightly raised, fingers twitching as if feeling the air, his feet landing where the vibrations were most solid, his breath measured, the noise of the arena fading in his mind until there was only the pattern of movement, the faint whine of machinery beneath the platform, the sharp buzz of energy beams. Before they fired, each sound telling him what to do and where to move next. On the upper balcony, the commander stood with his arms folded, his sharp gaze following the human. Beside him, an instructor from the insectoid worlds clicked his mandibles and said, "He is guessing. He will fail soon." Yet even as he spoke, Yarrick slipped past a pair of sweeping energy lines with barely a shift of his shoulders, his pace never breaking, and the commander's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he was beginning to see something the others did not. Halfway through the arena, the course changed, massive pillars rising from below, blocking paths, forcing cadets to leap across narrow gaps while avoiding falling debris. Several alien competitors panicked, their movements becoming jerky, and one collided with another, sending them both tumbling down, the crowd roaring in approval. But Yarrick seemed untouched by the chaos, each step placed exactly where it needed to be, his leaps clean, his landings balanced, as if the entire arena was moving in rhythm with his body. A sudden trap dropped from above, a heavy metal frame meant to pin cadets to the ground, and Yarrick's head turned slightly toward it an instant before it fell, his body twisting sideways, his foot brushing the edge as it slammed down where he had stood, the audience releasing another collective gasp, the sound rolling through the stands like thunder, and for the first time, some of those who had laughed began to lean forward, their eyes fixed on the strange human who moved without sight. The final stretch of the course was the most dangerous, narrow bridges rotating over the endless drop, small tiles that flipped without warning, and beams that forced cadets to duck or leap at random intervals. The few competitors still in the race pushed themselves hard, sweat or alien fluids shining on their skin, visors feeding them constant data. Yet Yarrick moved without hesitation, stepping onto a rotating bridge at the exact moment it slowed enough for him to cross, ducking under a beam. Before it had even fired, leaping from one tilting tile to another with the confidence of someone walking on solid ground. When his foot touched the final platform, the crowd erupted, not in laughter, but in cheers, the sound chaotic and loud, for they had just seen something they could not explain, and though two alien cadets had finished slightly before him, his time placed him in the top 3, a ranking many had believed impossible for a human, let alone one who refused to use his eyes, and in that roar of voices there was a shift. A change in the way they looked at him, no longer as a joke, but as a puzzle they wanted to solve. Yarrick stood on the final platform, lifting the blindfold just enough to reveal a faint smile to the audience before tying it back into place, his head turning toward the section where the loudest laughter had come before the trial. And though he said nothing, the message in his calm stance was clear. This was only the beginning. The commander stepped to the balcony rail and raised one hand for silence, his voice carrying across the arena. Cadet Yarrick of Earth completes the reflex arena in third place, blindfolded as declared, and his performance is hereby recognized as valid under trial rules. And with those words, the result became more than spectacle. It became official record, one that would be spoken of in the mess halls and corridors of the Academy for days to come. As Yarrick walked back through the preparation hall, the same aliens who had smirked now watched him with narrowed eyes, their pride stung, their certainty shaken, some muttering to each other that it must be a trick, others whispering that perhaps the humans had trained in secret methods unknown to the galaxy. And Marin came up beside him, her voice quiet but intense. "That was insane. You moved like you could see everything." And Yarrick only shook his head with that faint smile, saying, "I could hear everything." And before she could ask more, he kept walking, already thinking of the next trial, already listening for the patterns in the world around him. After the fierce battle of the reflex arena, the crowd buzzed with whispers and questions about the strange human who had moved blindfolded through danger as if guided by some unseen force. But the trials were far from over, and now Yarrick faced the next challenge known across the galaxy as the Mind Gauntlet, a test that would push not the body but the mind to its limits and beyond, where strength mattered little and focus could mean life or failure. The Mind Gauntlet was held deep inside the Academy's crystal dome, a place where light bent and shifted like water, and the walls were lined with shimmering panels that pulsed with color, as if alive, waiting to throw puzzles, illusions, and fears at the cadets, where the air itself seemed thick with pressure, making breaths come fast and hearts beat harder, and no one entered this chamber without feeling the weight of challenge heavy on their souls. Yarrick stepped into the dome alone, his black blindfold tied tightly as before. The only difference this time was the silence that greeted him, thick and heavy as the walls closed behind him, the murmurs of the crowd fading until only the sound of his own breath and heartbeat remained. And though the absence of light could have been terrifying, Yarrick welcomed it as a friend, his fingers curling into fists to the sides, ready to face what was coming. As the trial began, strange noises filled the dome, sharp clicks, whispers in alien tongues, shifting shadows that danced along the edges of his hearing, meant to confuse and frighten. But Yarrick's mind held steady. He remembered the training on Earth where he had sat in complete darkness for hours, learning to trust his thoughts and not the lies the world might show. The fear was a wave he could ride rather than drown in. A voice spoke suddenly, clear and cold. "You will solve the puzzle before you or fail forever." And though no eyes could see it, Yarrick imagined a panel sliding open in front of him, its surface covered in alien symbols that twisted and changed like living script, puzzles designed to break minds, tests that forced cadets to unravel the meaning behind impossible signs and shapes, and to do it under crushing pressure and time limits. His hands moved carefully, fingers searching for edges, raised shapes, the texture of carved stone and smooth metal mixed together. The puzzle was a strange maze of pieces that could be shifted, but only in certain orders, and the mind had to follow the rules as much as the hands, logic wrapped in mystery, like a riddle whispered on the wind, and Yarrick's mind settled into the rhythm of movement and thought, slow at first, then faster, the puzzle revealing its secrets one by one. Suddenly the dome shifted, lights flashing briefly to show shadows of impossible creatures creeping closer, their voices rising in shrieks meant to unsettle and distract. But Yarrick's breath did not falter, his mind locked on the task like a hunter's gaze fixed on a single point, ignoring the chaos around him, his hands turning pieces with steady confidence, the puzzle starting to form shapes that made sense, symbols aligning as if pulled by invisible strings. Across the galaxy, the other cadets struggled, some shouting in frustration, others collapsing to the floor in exhaustion as the mental pressure became unbearable. The gauntlet not just a test of intelligence, but of endurance, willpower, and calm under fire. But Yarrick moved with steady grace, his fingers flying as the puzzle came to life beneath his touch. The final pieces sliding smoothly into place as a soft chime echoed through the dome. The voice returned, now less cold and more impressed. Puzzle solved in record time. The trial is complete, and the lights shifted from chaotic colors to calm blues and greens, washing over Yarrick like a gentle tide. And though he still could not see the world around him, he felt a warmth growing inside, a quiet victory that steadied his soul. Outside the dome, whispers turned to stunned silence as the news spread. None had expected the human to survive the mind gauntlet, let alone finish faster than most alien cadets who had trained their whole lives for this moment. And the disbelief was thick, the crowd's laughter now replaced by cautious respect, eyes turning toward Earth as if it was suddenly a planet worthy of attention. Marin waited for Yarrick as he emerged from the trial chamber, her eyes wide with amazement. And when he finally pulled the blindfold away, she saw the calm determination in his gaze, the quiet strength that had carried him through every step, and she asked in a voice barely above a whisper, "How did you do it? How did you keep calm with all that noise and fear?" And Yarrick smiled faintly, saying, "I listen to my mind, not the voices. I see with my thoughts, not my eyes." The instructors gathered around, their faces a mixture of surprise and curiosity. One of the oldest among them, a tall figure with skin like cracked stone, nodded slowly and said, "This human's way is unlike anything we have seen. He uses senses beyond sight, beyond sound, and perhaps that is what makes him strong." And the word spread quickly. The idea that Yarrick had trained not only his body, but his mind in ways few understood, adding to his growing legend. In the quiet moments after the trial, Yarrick sat alone in a small chamber, eyes closed but no blindfold this time, letting the silence wash over him like a balm, feeling the hum of the Academy's walls, the distant pulse of ships arriving and leaving, the faint heartbeat of the planet beneath the space station. And in that silence he found strength, the kind that came from knowing that fear was only a shadow and the mind was the true weapon. Back in the Great Hall, the alien cadets whispered amongst themselves, the stories of Earth's strange warrior spreading like wildfire, some doubting, others eager to learn more, and even the commander's stern face softened as he looked at the young human and said, "This trial has shown us that strength takes many forms, and those who can master their minds will find power beyond muscle and weapon." And with those words the tide of opinion began to turn. As the sun set behind the great towers of the Academy, casting long shadows across the marble floors, Yarrick stood once more among his team, the black cloth still tied around his head, his calm presence a quiet storm that drew others near. And when Marin asked if he was ready for the next trial, he only nodded, his voice steady as a mountain stream. The mind is strong, but the spirit must be stronger. The day dawned sharp and clear above the Academy, the sky a deep blue that stretched beyond the tallest towers, and in the heart of the complex the combat ring waited like a silent beast, a circular arena surrounded by high walls of reinforced glass that shimmered with energy, reflecting the tension of the thousands gathered to watch the third trial, where strength, skill, and courage would be tested in the oldest way known to warriors: close combat. Yarrick stood quietly among the other cadets in the holding area, the black blindfold still tied firmly around his eyes, his breathing steady as he listened to the distant roar of the crowd and the subtle hum of the arena's energy field, his fingers lightly touching the edge of his combat gloves, feeling the worn leather and cold metal beneath his skin. And though the others glanced nervously at their weapons and armor, Yarrick seemed calm, as if he had fought battles far greater than this. The alien opponents were already waiting inside the ring, each one a living challenge, warriors shaped by worlds of fire and ice, their muscles rippling beneath strange skin, some with multiple arms or tails, others with armored shells that gleamed under the arena lights, their eyes sharp and cold as they prepared to face whatever came next, and many of them looked with disbelief at the blindfolded human who had chosen to face them without sight. Marin came close to Yarrick, her voice low but urgent, Are you sure you want to do this without seeing? The fight could end in a heartbeat, and we all know the risks. But Yerrick only smiled faintly, his words calm as a river flowing deep underground. I've trained for this, not with eyes, but with everything else. And her eyes searched his face for a sign of doubt, but found none, only quiet determination that steadied her own nerves. The combat coordinator's voice echoed across the arena. Challengers ready, and the energy gates slid open with a hiss, revealing the vast ring below, the floor marked with ancient symbols of battle that glowed faintly, a reminder of the history and honor bound to every fight here. And Yerrick stepped forward first, feeling the solid ground beneath his boots, the air thick with the scent of sweat and metal and raw power. His opponent emerged, a towering figure from the planet Varric, with 4 muscular arms and thick scales that shimmered like molten rock, each limb ending in claws sharp enough to tear through steel, and the crowd's roar grew louder, betting heavily against the human who could not see the danger coming, the one who refused to fight like the others, relying instead on senses that seemed impossible. The horn sounded, a deep call that echoed through the arena like thunder, and the fight began, Yerrick moving first not with speed but with precision, stepping aside as the giant's claws swung through the air, each blow narrowly missing as if the human had seen them before they started, his hands raised softly, ready to block or strike. And the silence in his mind grew louder than the crowd as he focused on every sound and breath and vibration around him. The Varakian's second set of arms came crashing down like hammers, but Yerrick shifted his weight, twisting his body with a grace that seemed almost impossible for a man without sight, his foot finding a small stone on the ground that he used to push off, delivering a sharp strike to the side of his opponent's knee, and the crowd gasped as the giant stumbled, momentarily off balance. Jarek's breath was steady, slow, controlled, as if he was moving through a dance known only to himself, dodging and striking in rhythms that his enemies could not predict, his fists finding weak spots in the armor that the great Varakian had missed in training. And with every blow the alien's movements grew slower, his confidence shaken by an opponent who seemed to see without eyes. The crowd, once filled with jeers and doubt, now held its breath, watching the impossible fight unfold before them. And even the other cadets began to whisper among themselves, some with awe, others with fear, realizing that Yerrick was not just lucky or strong, but connected to the battle in a way they could not understand. A sudden roar came from the Varakian as he swung all 4 arms in a desperate attack, and Yerrick responded by dropping low, feeling the rush of air as the claws passed overhead, his own arms moving quickly to strike the throat, then the side, then the chest, his fists landing with the force of a hammer without wasting a single motion. The giant's knees buckled, and with one final strike to the temple, Yerrick sent him crashing to the ground, the crowd erupting in a mix of cheers and stunned silence. And the black blindfold remained tied around his eyes, hiding the fire that burned inside, the calm confidence that had carried him through the trial. As Yerrick stood over his fallen opponent, the combat coordinator's voice rang out. Cadet Yerrick of Earth has won the combat ring without opening his eyes, a feat never before achieved in Academy history. And with those words the arena shook with applause, the sound like a wave that swept across the stands and carried the human's name into legend. Marin rushed forward as the gates opened, her eyes shining with pride and disbelief. How did you do it? How could you fight like that without seeing? And Yerrick smiled softly, his voice quiet but sure. I fought with my mind and my senses. The eyes are only part of the picture. And she nodded, understanding growing in her heart that there was more to this human than anyone had guessed. Back in the preparation hall, the alien cadets who had watched the fight spoke in hushed tones, some questioning if their own training was enough, others eager to learn what secrets Yerrick held. And one of the oldest instructors, a stooped figure with skin like cracked rock, said quietly, "This human strength is not in his eyes, but in his spirit, and that is something we cannot teach easily." As the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the academy grounds, Yerrick stood once more with his team, the black blindfold still wrapped around his head, his calm presence a quiet force that seemed to pull others toward him. And when Marin asked softly if he was ready for the next trial, he only nodded, his voice steady and sure. The mind is strong, but the spirit must be stronger. The air was thin and cold as the sun cast long shadows across the training grounds. The impossible course stretched out before the cadets like a maze built by the stars themselves, a place where gravity shifted and moved like a living thing, where blades spun in deadly arcs and minds hovered silently waiting to explode with a single touch, a course designed to break the strongest and smartest warriors. And today it awaited Yarrick, the human who had amazed all with his blindfolded trials. Yarrick stood at the edge of the course, the black cloth tied firmly across his eyes, his breath calm despite the danger that hummed in the air, the low buzz of energy mines hidden in the mist, the sharp glint of spinning blades catching the fading light, and all around him other cadets checked their equipment, their scanners glowing as they prepared to map the safest path through the chaos, their faces tense with worry and excitement. Marin came to his side, her voice low and steady. This course has ended many before they even started. It will test every sense you have left. And Yarrick nodded slowly, his fingers brushing the cloth to remind himself of the darkness he had chosen to face, saying, "I will move by feeling the world, not by seeing it." And her eyes searched his face, searching for fear, but finding only quiet resolve. The signal sounded, a low rumble that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them, and the cadets moved forward, their steps careful as the course shifted beneath their feet, the blades spinning faster, the mines humming louder, the walls closing and opening like the breath of some giant beast, and the crowd watching from above held their breath, some cheering, others silent in tense anticipation. Yarrick stepped onto the course with the grace of a dancer, his feet barely touching the ground as he felt the vibrations through the shifting tiles, the air moving against his skin, the faintest changes in sound that told him where danger lurked. And though the darkness was complete, he moved as if the course was a map drawn inside his mind, every step planned yet fluid, every movement a balance between control and freedom. Around him, other cadets struggled, their scanners blinking warnings as they tried to find safe paths, some slipping on the unstable ground, others frozen in hesitation as spinning blades came close, the crowd gasping as a large cadet from the icy world of Kralix was caught by a mine and thrown from the course, the explosion lighting the mist like a sudden starburst, and the danger felt real and close to all who watched. But Yarrick moved on, his hands reaching out before him, sensing the air and the vibrations like a blind hunter, his feet landing on solid ground at the last possible moment before the tiles shifted, his body twisting away from blades that sang as they passed, his breath steady as he crossed narrow bridges that turned beneath his weight, and every near miss made the audience's hearts pound faster. In the middle of the course, the walls closed in tighter, forcing cadets into a narrow corridor where energy mines hovered on both sides, ready to detonate at the slightest touch. And here many faltered, their nerves breaking under the pressure, their movements jerky and unsure. But Yarrick moved with calm certainty, his body flowing like water through the traps, his hands brushing past the mines without triggering them, his mind focused like a laser on the path ahead. A sudden shift in gravity sent cadets tumbling as the course flipped sideways, the blades now spinning in new directions, and the crowd gasped as a cadet from the desert planet, Zar, fell from a bridge, disappearing into the mist below. But Yarrick adjusted instantly, his feet pushing off the wall, his body spinning through the air before landing with perfect balance, the black blindfold still firmly in place, his senses alive to every motion and sound. As he neared the final stretch, the course became a series of floating platforms that shifted faster than the eye could follow, each one tilting and turning as if trying to throw cadets off. And here Yarrick's calm control was most clear, his body moving with the rhythm of the course, stepping and leaping with the confidence of a man who knew the dance of danger better than anyone else. When his foot finally touched the last platform, the crowd erupted, not with laughter but with wild cheers, the noise echoing like thunder through the arena, for Yarrick had done what many thought impossible, finishing the impossible course faster than any cadet before him, and doing it blindfolded made the feat even more astonishing, his name now ringing out like a star in the galaxy. Marin ran to meet him as he stepped off the course, her eyes shining with pride and disbelief. "You did it! You really did it!" And Yerrick smiled, the black cloth slipping from his head as he looked at her, and said simply, "I'm moved with the world, not against it." And in his voice was the quiet joy of one who had touched the impossible and made it real. Back in the halls of the academy, the alien cadets who had watched the trial spoke in hushed tones, their doubts fading into respect, and even the instructors nodded in approval. One saying softly, "This human has found a way to use senses we do not understand. His strength is in his connection to the world around him." And that was a lesson that many would remember long after the trials were over. As night fell and the stars shone above the academy, Yerrick stood with his team, the black cloth now folded and tucked into his belt, his calm smile brighter than the distant sun's. And when Marin asked if he was ready for the final trials, he nodded with quiet certainty, saying, "The course is just a path. The challenge is in the spirit." And with that, the story of Earth's cadet was becoming legend, a story that would be told across the stars. After the impossible course, the murmurs in the academy halls grew louder, whispers weaving through the crowd like wildfire. Everyone curious about the human named Yerrick who had defied every expectation and stunned the galaxy with his blindfolded victories. The way he moved without sight had become the talk of every corner of the station, yet few truly understood the source of his strength. And so the time came when the truth would need to be spoken, a truth that carried more weight than any blade or shield. In the quiet hours before the next trial, reporters and instructors gathered in the hall outside the Earth Cadets' quarters, their eyes bright with questions and curiosity. And Yerrick stood before them, calm and steady, the black cloth now folded at his side, his voice clear as he began to explain the secret behind his success, a secret that had been shaped long before he set foot in the academy. He spoke of Earth, a small blue world filled with dangers hidden beneath its beauty, of forests dark and deep where silence was broken only by the steps of unseen creatures, of deserts that stretched like endless oceans of sand, where storms could strip flesh from bone, and mountains so high they pierced the clouds and tested the limits of any who dared to climb, places where survival depended on more than just strength or speed, but on senses sharpened by hardship and the will to endure. Yerrick told of his father, a retired space pilot who had taught him lessons beyond the stars, lessons that could not be found in any academy or training manual, lessons about trust and fear, about listening to the world in ways that went beyond sight, and about fighting with the body and the mind as one, a balance that was rare but powerful. And he explained how those lessons had shaped him into a warrior who did not rely on eyes, but on instincts honed by years of silent training. He described how Earth warriors trained in the art of sensing the unseen, how they learned to feel the slightest changes in air pressure, to hear the faintest shifts in sound, to sense vibrations that others missed, skills born of necessity in a world where danger often came from what could not be seen, and how those skills had been pushed to their limits as he prepared for the trials, practicing in darkness and silence until his other senses became as sharp as any alien visor or sensor. The crowd listened in silence, the weight of his words sinking deep into their minds, challenging their beliefs about strength and weakness, about what it meant to be a warrior in a galaxy filled with wonders and threats. And as he finished, a heavy pause settled over the room, broken only by the soft hum of the station around them. One of the instructors, a tall figure with eyes like burning coals, stepped forward and said, "Your training is unlike any we have seen, Cadet Yerrick, and it forces us to reconsider the meaning of power and skill. Your methods may change the way we prepare all future warriors," and murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. The idea of learning from Earth's strange and silent ways gaining respect even among the most skeptical. Marin stood beside Yerrick, pride shining in her eyes as she added quietly, "He is not just strong because of his body, but because of his mind and heart. And that is a strength many forget to train, a strength that makes him a true cadet and a true warrior." And the others nodded, the seed of a new respect beginning to grow within them. As the sun set beyond the windows of the academy, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts on the walls, Yerrick felt a quiet peace settle over him. knowing that the truth was out and that the laughter and mockery were fading into memory, replaced by a cautious admiration and curiosity that would fuel the challenges yet to come. But the next trial awaited, a final test that would push every skill, every lesson, and every ounce of courage to the edge. And as Yera prepared for what lay ahead, he knew that his story was no longer just his own, but belonged to all those who dared to believe in strength beyond sight. The great hall of the academy was filled with light that shimmered like liquid silver, the highest balconies packed with cadets and instructors, their eyes fixed on the center where the last trial would take place, a test known simply as the Ascension, a challenge that combined every skill learned and every strength earned, a trial designed to crown the true champion of the stars. And today the air was thick with expectation and the sharp scent of anticipation. Yarrick stood calmly at the edge of the arena, the familiar black blindfold tied firmly across his eyes, his breath slow and steady as he felt the pulse of the ground beneath his boots, the hum of the energy fields, and the distant murmur of the crowd that was now silent in respect, no longer filled with doubt or laughter, but with hope and awe for the human who had proven himself time and again. Beside him, Marin gave a small nod, her eyes shining with pride and trust, and Yarrick returned the gesture, the two sharing a silent promise that no matter what happened, they would face it together. And then the doors opened with a deep hiss, revealing the vast arena ahead, filled with shifting platforms, floating rings, energy beams, and obstacles that tested every sense and skill imaginable. The announcer's voice rang out, clear and strong. "Welcome to the Ascension, the final trial of the Academy, where only the strongest, smartest, and bravest shall rise, and the challenge begins now." And with that, the platform shifted, the rings spun in slow arcs, the energy beams pulsed with light, and the trial was underway. Yarrick stepped forward with slow confidence, his feet landing softly on the first platform, his hands raised slightly to feel the air, to sense the flow of energy and movement around him. And though he could not see, his other senses were alive, his mind sharp and focused like a blade honed by fire and patience. And the crowd watched in silence, waiting for the moment when the impossible might become real. The platforms moved unpredictably, tilting and spinning, forcing cadets to adjust balance and timing with perfect precision, and energy beams swept across the arena in patterns that seemed to change with every second, some slow and steady, others quick and deadly, and the path was not straight, but full of twists and turns, testing endurance and willpower as much as skill. Yarrick moved with grace, his body flowing through the shifting maze like water, his feet finding steady ground even when it seemed the platforms wanted to throw him off, his hands brushing through the air to feel the space before him, to catch the faint hum of energy and the soft vibrations of movement. And every step was a choice made with calm certainty, never rushed, but never slow enough to lose the rhythm. Around him, other cadets struggled, some falling into the mist below, others frozen in fear as the beams closed in, and the crowd gasped and cheered with every success and failure. But Yarrick remained steady, his mind clear, his spirit strong, as if he was dancing with the arena itself rather than fighting against it. A sudden spin of the largest ring sent Yarrick flying for a moment, but his body twisted in midair, arms reaching out to catch the edge, and with a soft grunt, he pulled himself up, the blindfold hiding the flash of determination in his eyes, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause, recognizing the strength that came not from sight, but from heart and will. The final section was the most difficult, a narrow path of floating tiles that shifted and flipped unpredictably, with energy beams firing from above and below. And here many cadets hesitated, their movements becoming slow and uncertain. But Yarrick's breath stayed steady, his steps flowing with the rhythm of the course, his hands sensing the changes in the air and guiding his body through the deadly dance. When his foot finally touched the last platform, the silence of the crowd broke into a roar, the sound washing over the arena like a wave, and the announcer's voice boomed once more. "Cadet Yarrick of Earth has completed the Ascension blindfolded, a feat never before achieved in Academy history. And by that act, he is declared the champion of the trials, a true warrior of the stars, and the cheers rose higher, carrying his name across the galaxy. Yarrick removed his blindfold slowly, his eyes meeting the sea of faces filled with respect and admiration. And as he stood tall, his chest rising with pride and quiet joy, he knew that his journey had changed not just his fate, but the fate of all those who believed in strength beyond sight, beyond doubt. Marin stepped forward, her smile bright and full of hope, and as she clasped his hand, she said, "You show them all what it means to be a true cadet. Not by your eyes, but by your spirit." And Yarrick nodded. The words simple, but full of meaning. The trials were never about sight. They were about trust. Trust in yourself, in your training, and in the world around you. The commander of the academy approached, his voice deep and full of respect. "Cadet Yarrick, you have set a new standard for all who will come after. Your courage and skill will be remembered for generations." And with that, the ceremony began, banners rising, music swelling, and the crowd chanting the name of the human who had risen above all expectations. As the stars shone brightly above the academy that night, Yarrick looked out across the horizon, feeling the weight of victory and the promise of new adventures yet to come. And in that moment, he knew that this was only the beginning of a story that would echo across the galaxy, a story of a cadet who had dared to believe in the impossible and had made it real.